Our goal today is to come up with some ways that we found have been successful for our clients to optimize mail spends and improve visibility. So what we're going to cover today is, first off, we're going to start out with the equipment portion. So how do you choose the right system for you? And then how do you choose the right vendor for that equipment? And then negotiate the best pricing. Then when you're managing those relationships, there are lots of gotchas and hidden things. So how do you watch out for fees, billing overcharges? And then how do you figure out what's the best funding strategies for those meters? And there are a couple different options. Then we found millions of dollars in lost postage for our clients. We're going to talk to you about how you can find those yourselves. There's a loyalty point program from one of the vendors that you can cash in if you have unused points, supply strategies you can use, and then creating visibility and oversight with the tools that you have. And then as a bonus, the USPS has just approved the upcoming rate change, and we're going to talk to you about some of the core rates that are changing with some savings ideas that you can implement around those rates and what things to look for. So first off, choosing the right system. So you can pretty much bucket most mailing equipment into three categories: low, mid, and high. And it's really geared by your postage spends of sort of what tier you need to be in on, excuse me, and what type of equipment and what features those things have. So we're focusing primarily on postage meters or mailing systems today, but we have guides on our website across all types of mailing equipment. If you need it, you can find it on our blog. We have things on inserters, addressing systems, envelope printers. So anything that you're looking for in mailing equipment, we've probably done a write-up on it. Okay, but today we're going to focus mostly on mailing machines and then the visibility that comes around from them. So the first thing is you want to buy the right level of equipment. And why is this important? It's important because service. So if you're trying to push huge volumes through a unit that can't handle it, you're going to have service problems. More commonly, we see the opposite, though, is people that are overbuying, where they're buying really big machines but don't really need it, and they're spending a lot more money than they need to. And then the biggest piece of all this is, what is the productivity of it? If you have, low volume units, they're not designed to handle huge volumes. You're going to take longer to process. And the flip side, if you have these big complex units to do low volumes, you're not going to be as productive, and operators are going to struggle. So mail machines are pretty much divided into these three categories: low, mid, and high. And even if you look at the vendors' websites, you'll see these same criteria used. The core difference, the number one difference that machines have, is speed. So low volume machines are typically designed for people spending less than $500 a month on postage. And those usually go at 15 to 45 letters a minute. Mid-tier machines in the 500 to 5,000 range, and high volume for people doing more than 5,000. So obviously there's some borders between these where someone falls into maybe between two groups, but these are like the core ways that the mail machines differentiate their machines, and the speeds sort of have to be in line with those. It's the biggest differentiator. I wouldn't assume, like if a machine says it's 180 letters per minute, I wouldn't assume that's the speed you're going to get. We usually tell clients to assume 50 to 75% of that speed is more reasonable. And that's because you have to load and unload. Occasionally there'll be paper stalls, envelope jams and things like that. Just nobody runs machines 100%, multiple shifts at full output. Usually there's a degradation in that speed. Envelope feeding. So how do you want to run mail through it? So in these different categories, small, mid, and large, there are different ways these things work. In the small category, usually they're hand-fed machines, and those are one of two ways. You either push the really low volume machines, you push the envelope in, it stamps it, and you pull it straight out back to you. Bigger, high hand feed machines, you push from the left and it exits on the right, and you can just sort of continue feeding it as they're running through. And then there's automatic feed, which means you can take a whole pile of envelopes, dump it on the stack, or hit start and shoot it through the machine. And then it's important to look at what are the exit options. Like, how do you need it to exit the machine? Does it just drop into a catch tray or a drop stacker? Or do you need a power stacker or a conveyor at the end so you can have large volumes of mail exit? Then we talk about sealing. So how do you need these systems to seal the envelopes? And so what that means is, you would think that all machines are the same, but they're not. Low volume machines seal envelopes like you would have like a box of envelopes. When you open a box of envelopes, all the flaps are closed, and that's the way most mail machines seal the envelopes. But If you have a high volume machine that you've had for a while, it may have a feature where it can seal flaps with the envelopes closed or the envelopes open. What's important about that is if you have that feature and people are bringing mail down to you with the flaps open, you want to make sure that that's a feature if needed on the new whatever replacement machine you're looking at. Also, it's important because open and closed sealing can also do sealed and unsealed pieces together. And so it's just an important distinction if you're in a high volume machine that you talk about this feature. Tapes. Sometimes you're running things that are too big to run through a machine. And so what type of tape mechanism does it have on it? So at the basic level is like this down here on the bottom left. They use tape sheets, and every machine can run this. It's basically like you're running the tapes through like an envelope. Mid-level machines are going to have a strip tape dispenser. So these middle tapes that you can see the picture of, and you can load 20 or 50 into a dispenser. You hit the button and the tape shoots out. And then higher volume units use these these rolls of tape that can be inserted into the machine, and it cuts it to the predetermined length. The roll tapes are usually the least expensive, and the roll tapes can come in two versions, either the kind that you peel the backings off of or the kind that have glue on the back and they come out wet. So it gets important because of the supply cost and the productivity, and it's also what you're used to. So if you're doing a lot of tapes, you want to pay a lot of attention to this feature. If it's something that you're not doing very much of, the more basic versions will work fine. Now, this is one of the gotchas of mailing equipment. Mailing equipment scales through all the vendors come in these different denominations: 2 pounds, 5, 10, 15, 30, 70, and 149. Those are the most common denominations that scales come in. The issue is, do you need all that capacity? Most organizations, for anything heavier than, let's say, 3 or 5 pounds, are going to ship it through one of the private carriers, UPS or FedEx. So is there a need on the mail machine itself to have a large scale? The cost of these scales from the mailing vendors are incredibly expensive. Scales cost anywhere between $1,000 to $4,000 for an external scale. And this compares to going to Staples and buying a 100-pound electronic scale for $100 that you could use for weighing. So be careful of buying too big a scale for the machine that you're using, for the machine that you need. Usually 2 to 10-pound scales are going to be fine for most clients. If you need heavier, they do come in bigger denominations. The next piece is there are some different options for scales. So do you need an off-weight processing option? And what that means is most scales, you take a single piece, you put it on the external scale, it weighs it, and then sends it through it. Then you can print out a tape or run it through the machine. But if you have lots of big items that you need to weigh, there's something called off-weight processing, which means you could put the whole pile on the scale at once. And as you remove a piece from the scale, it subtracts the weight and then sets the meter for the right amount. So it's a feature that has an additional cost to it. Lots of people end up paying for it, not realizing they have it. And we just like people to be aware of it and validate that they actually need it. The other big feature, and we find it really helpful for people who are spending over maybe $1,500 to $2,000 a month in postage, is to have an internal scale. And that is taking a pile of mail like you see here, stacking it on the feeder, and having the machine send it through, weigh each piece, adjust for the right size, and print the right amount of postage. It's a much faster way than having to put each one of these items on the scale one at a time and validate its weight. Postal accounting. And this is one of the core items in order to get visibility, but there are a lot of things that have changed in postal accounting. So from the basic is, do you need to track postage by departments or cost centers inside your mail operation? If you do, how many accounts do you need to track? Then, assuming you need to track it, what information do you need from that? Do you just need a month-end summary that tells you how many pieces and amount of postage that each department did? Or do you need the details of every transaction? Could someone from marketing come back to you and say, I didn't spend $785 last month, give me proof. And then you have to prove every single piece they ran and when they ran it. That's the transaction level detail. But the biggest change that's happened in accounting is, how do you need to access this data? So you just need from the screen to pull out some numbers or a meter tape with some totals? Do you need a connected printer, which prints out these reports? Can you hardwire these machines either through a USB stick or through connected directly to a PC or laptop to get the totals? The most common thing that we're seeing, and the best trend we find, is access from the vendor's website. So the vendors have an option for you to have an analytical tool that can basically log into the vendor's website and then pull in all of your accounting detail, export it to an Excel spreadsheet, and then have all your data that you can work with. So we found that that's the greatest trend, and it gives you people the most flexibility. Do you need to print anything more? So every meter can print the meter imprint. All meters can print inscriptions if you're using a pre-sort service or if you have different inscriptions that you need. But some of the higher end meters can also print different things, like if you need to print custom graphics or messages or advertisements, QR codes, if you need to print the return address. Be careful on this feature. If it's something that seems like a nice to have, you want to validate that it would be used, because the cost of these features is higher. The maintenance contracts for units that can print in color are higher. And so just make sure that it's a needed feature. Lots of people have this feature, but frankly don't use it. So it was sold to them, but it wasn't something that actually got implemented. So just be careful on that if you're looking at that as a needed feature. Space requirements. It's very important to know the space of this equipment. So, and you can see the space below when we've used for the most common low, mid, and high volume systems. It's not only the length of space you need on the table, it's also the height. So if you have a cabinet above the machine, you have to open the machine in order to be able to fix it or change tapes and inks. So you want to make sure that you have enough space above you. The vendors provide consoles, but the consoles are usually pretty expensive. So it's just a question to make sure that you have the right amount of space in your operation and it's a sturdy footprint that can handle the units. So those are the main features that we look for across units. And we just wanted to make sure that you had a basis of like how to look at these things. It's more than just a machine and what you had before. There are certain features that have to be validated to make sure you're not overspending. So now that we have that together, how do you select the right mailing vendor for your equipment? So we recommend that you shop between at least 2 different vendors. Luckily, there's not a tremendous number of places that you can go for this equipment. There's Pitney Bowes, Neopost, Hassler, who's owned by Neopost, FP, which is also known as Francotype Postalia, DataPack, which is a really small vendor that usually is in a niche place around accounting and sometimes in the mailhouse space. And then there's PC postage options, which you can look at Pitney Bowes and stamps.com. So you want to compare the vendors based on features and specifications, the service support in your area, and it's important to ask for references. We'd love to say that a vendor has uniformly great service everywhere, but in some markets, service is going to be better than others. In some markets, you're being serviced directly by a corporate service organization, and some you're going to be serviced by a dealership. So based on where you are, you want to find out, what type of service you're getting. The total cost of ownership, is it purchased or leased? Are there any hidden gotchas? And then the ease of doing business with that vendor. How easy have they been in the past? Like if it's your current vendor, how easy has billing been? Support, have they gotten back to you? Because they're going to be the nicest to you at a renewal point versus, an ongoing basis. So just how easy is your current vendor being? And if you're considering switching vendors, find some proofs of like the core things you're going to need support on. Negotiate the best deal. So there are lots of things to watch out for. And so we do this every day for our clients. We manage 93,000 pieces of mailing equipment. So we're managing these renewals for our clients. So these are things that we're finding that help us negotiate the best pricing for our clients. And these are things that you can watch out for. So first off, do you want to lease or purchase? They both have their merits and they should be looked at when you're making a decision about new equipment. For the low end stuff, we typically see that people are going to lease or rent it. For the mid to high end equipment, a lot of clients benefit from purchasing or leasing depending on the type of pricing you get. If you are going to lease, avoid some lease gotchas. First off, evergreen clauses. You want to make sure that at the end of the lease, there's nothing in the terms and conditions that says that by not renewing within a 90-day period, or not telling the vendor you're terminating, that they can lock you into a successive agreement for the future. So the most common that we see in the industry is 12 months. So if you don't notify the vendor of any changes, up to 90 days prior to the end of a lease, that you get extended and automatically an extra year. So it's important to check in your terms and conditions to see if there is that clause. Remaining balances. We never recommend clients renew leases prior to the end of lease. If you have 6 months left on a lease, typically the vendor is adding the remaining 6 months of that lease into the new agreement. making your new price higher than it would be if you waited to the end of the lease. There are certain situations where that makes sense to do. Let's say you're consolidating multiple sites, closing a location, and you need to move equipment, or there could be reasons why you're doing something. Needs change dramatically. You can do remaining balances, but it's important to know what the value of that remaining balance is being put into the new agreement. And then lease extensions. So if you're extending your lease an extra, 2 years, 3 years, and the vendors are going to try to get you to do automatic extensions or extension periods, sign up now, and you can lock in your lease rate for the next 3 years with no price increases or save 10%. Make sure that's a good decision versus just being on a month-to-month agreement and having more flexibility in the equipment. You don't have to just lock in your current agreement for another successive period. There are different options for you to consider. When you get any lease document or purchase document and it lists out all the items and descriptions of those items, some of those things are chargeable and some of them aren't. And so it's important to question every line item in that description. Things like, off-weight wing, differential wing, scale sizes, accounting features, those things could be chargeable. And if you don't have visibility to what those things are being charged and how much they are, then you don't know if you're making the best decision. We recommend that you make every agreement all-inclusive. And by all-inclusive, I mean make sure that every agreement includes the equipment itself, the meter rental, meter resets. That's the time when you add money into your meter. There are some times where there are fees to refill your meter. Postage advances means if you're borrowing money from the vendor as far as your postage, that you're being, make sure that there's no fee to borrow those funds. Maintenance contracts and rate updates. Those are the most common. So make sure in all your agreements it includes all those. If you're a single location, buy at the end of the month or the end of the quarter. The vendors are going to be the most hungry for better deals at those times. And if you're multiple locations, which is where we spend the majority of our time, we try to use the spend across an organization to negotiate a national contract, basically to have a master service agreement with the chosen vendor. So in essence, we typically will run bids for our clients, use their consolidated spend, and then help set national contract rates, which gives us fixed prices for certain models of equipment that are the most common. And we found that this is the most helpful way to do it, and it guarantees that our clients have fixed terms in place when they need equipment in the future. So that's what we recommend if you have multiple locations. Fees. This is a fee-ridden business. And if you don't spend time looking at the invoices, you might miss some that are expensive. So the most common that we see are refill fees on meters, advance charges on meters, late fees and finance charges that can be as high as 20% or more on postage. If you have annual rewards program fees, if there's insurance fees on leases that every lease for every vendor requires that you provide proof of insurance. And if you don't provide proof of insurance, they assign their own insurance that's on lots of invoices that we see for clients. So it's important to look through these and make sure you understand what you're paying for. So the best practice strategies for your bills is, first off, this sounds obvious, pay bills on time. It sounds obvious, but as we deal a lot with larger organizations, and they have a very difficult time turning around a postage bill in 27 to 30 days. And if you don't pay a postage bill in full and it's an advance of funds, then you're going to spend 15 to 22% on postage as a finance charge plus a late fee. We find companies spending tens of thousands of dollars in these fees unknowingly. Look at every invoice and validate all the chargeable items. Make sure that you understand what you're being billed for. Cancel the vendor insurance. You just need to provide proof of insurance to the vendor on each agreement. Terminate chargeable loyalty programs. So if you're being charged a fee for any loyalty program, the loyalty programs can come free, and you might not need the extra super special loyalty program they've signed you up for. And then make sure postage refill and advance charges are included or monitored. Okay, like I said, this is an area where we find lots of issues. Look for billing overcharges. We've helped our clients recover $5 million in overcharges from the mailing vendors, and they'll help you refund them if they catch a mistake. No one's perfect in their billing. This isn't meant to poke holes. It's just saying that with changes that happen, bills get sent out incorrectly. So the most common that we see are locations being invoiced for equipment that was picked up or no longer in use, meter rentals, refill and advance and maintenance charges and scale rate changes, being invoiced, but it should have been covered in an all-inclusive lease that was signed, locations not getting corporate discounts for supplies, meter rentals, and maintenance agreements, and just sometimes bills just going out at the wrong rates. So it's important that you understand what you're being billed for, you know your baseline of what you're supposed to be charged, and that you have some validation process for checking them, because there's money that is being overspent, we find in most clients. Postage funding. How are you going to fund all of your meters? How are you going to pay for postage? So there's two ways to do it. You can prepay, which means basically like a checking account. You send money into a bank account with the meter vendors or at the post office, and then the sites draw off those funds. Or use an advance. An advance means the vendor loans you the money for postage. At the end of the month, you get a statement of your use and you pay off that statement. So the advantage of prepay is there's no fees. The advantage of advances, it's very convenient. It's very convenient to just not have to worry about your balances and all these meters, all these postage accounts. You just get to pay for your use. So some things to think about. One of the vendors offers interest on prepaid balances, but the interest is very small. It's a fraction of a percent, and it's only for balances, I believe, over $10,000 or $15,000. So interest wouldn't be a main criteria for using the advance. If you want to use the prepay. If you want to use the prepay, it's because you like the idea of funding it ahead of time, but I wouldn't make the interest your big driver. Choose one payment method and stick with it. We find so many organizations that prepay sometimes, and some sites they advance, and then they have money sitting in prepaid accounts, and they have credit sitting in advance accounts because they're using multiple different methods. So we recommend having things in one method and be consistent with it. Know the balances. So check the balances of what you have in the meters themselves as well as the postage accounts. Don't send money to the USPS. All the vendors offer their own service where you can send money to them. We recommend that. It's going to be easier for the vendor to track it. And then the vendors trying to get you set up as ACH. They want to link directly into your bank accounts. We never are 100% comfortable with that. It works perfectly fine for clients, but there's an issue about control when you're linked directly to your bank account. Okay. The other thing is, if you have multiple machines, look at consolidated postage accounts. So we have lots of accounts we've set up where they have 10, 20, 50, 100, hundreds of meters on consolidated postage accounts, either prepay or advance. So it's a best-in-class funding strategy, and you can get one bill for all your charges or one account to export all your fees from. Recover lost postage. So about 25% of all postage meters have been turned in the United States since 2010. So, and it's going to continue to happen. And then think about all the places where you're merging, you're changing vendors, you're doing all these movements of equipment. The question is, what happens to that meter and to that postage account when the meter vendor changes, or the postage account gets closed, or the meter gets closed? Does someone go to the meter vendor, know their account number, fill out the postage refund request form, validate that the postage refund request form got submitted properly and the funds got reimbursed? In many cases, this doesn't happen. We've found over $2.6 million for our clients sitting in dormant postage accounts that we've gotten refunded for them. Also, we have a database of over 27,000 transactions of funds that have been turned over to the states as unclaimed property. It happens because an office closes, merges, or they just turn in their meter. Also, with most of the time when someone sends in a check for $10,000 in postage, at that point they expense the funds. As far as they're concerned, that money has been expensed. But in truth, it's not. It's money that was put into a meter. A meter is in essence a bank account. It's an asset. But if they're not, so they're not tracking these assets, and that's why the money gets lost. Sometimes it happens because an advance account is used, but there's still funds sitting in a prepaid account that nobody ever cashed out. So the steps to find your money. First, find all your account numbers for your current and past meters. Know your postage account numbers. Enter these numbers online on the vendor's website to see if there's any data available. And then contact the meter vendors to validate what funds are available in those accounts. And then check the unclaimed funds databases to see if funds were turned in. These are the steps that we do for our accounts, and it helps them to get money back. And because there's money out there, and the largest single transaction we ever found for a client was $201,000 sitting in a dormant postage account. And we found multiple sort of at that level. And so you never know what you're going to find. Sometimes you find these treasures. Cash in loyalty points. So Pitney Bowes is a really good loyalty rewards program that through their purchase power postage advance piece. And basically they give you like 1% back in loyalty points for all your postage spends and supply spends, and if you use some other value added services for them. So these points will show on the upper right of any purchase power bill from them. The issue is that most people don't know there's this loyalty program. And these points, after certain periods of time expire. So you need 12,500 points equals $50, and you could see what that is. And there's a website where you can go cash in these points. And these points can be cashed in for credits for your postage account, where you could order supplies or buy extra postage, or personal gifts. So the issue is, if your employees do know about that and are cashing in these rewards for personal gifts, that may not be what you want from a corporate perspective. So we try to cash these things in for our clients. You can do the same thing. And we try to cash them in so they can become credits on the account. It's just important that you know that this money is available and out there and that it can be redeemed. Supply strategies. So most of our clients do buy their ink and tapes and meter supplies from the vendors themselves. There are some strategies you can look at in order to save money on these, and supplies can be very expensive. So if you look at the ink as an example, it costs, ink for postage meters costs, anywhere between, 1/3 of a cent for your high volume equipment up to 6 cents, for low volume machines. So there are companies spending tens of thousands of dollars on meter ink. And so it's important to look at strategies to reduce these costs. You look at the meter tapes and it's the same thing. So strategies that we recommend are buying in bulk. So all the vendors will give you options to, if you buy multiple of a certain item, that you can get a price break. Check third-party non-OEM. OEM is original equipment manufacturer for the low volume equipment. You can go to Staples and Office Depot and multiple other supply outlets, and the low volume meters that are very common, they'll have third-party brands, new and remanufactured, that you can buy. At the low volume sect, I haven't heard of any clients having poor experiences with them. At the high volume, I'm always nervous about it, because high volume equipment you're really depending on, you're pushing volumes through it. Like heaven forbid an ink cartridge fails and blows up in a machine. The meter vendors will charge you for any service calls related to any any third-party inks or tapes. So it's just important to, like, on the low end, I don't see it as a huge risk. At the high end, you may want to just consider using the actual vendor for that. With your vendor, ask for discounts. If you have multiple sites or buying large amounts of supplies, ask if you're eligible for any contracted rates. Can you get a contract list of the supply items you're buying on a regular basis and make sure that you're getting the highest level of discounts? Is there any visibility that the vendors can provide to the supplies you're buying so you can see where you can get the best rates and where you need help in extra discounts? And then 10, visibility and oversight. The biggest way to save money on this category as a whole is to get decent reporting. And you would think that sounds obvious. Well, of course you need great reports on your mail spend. If we went to 100 customers and we asked them for the reports that they have, and these are customers that have some fleets of mailing equipment, I would say, give or take 10 in 100, 1 in 10 have decent reports on this spend. And that might be even, too much. So you can go to your vendors and you can ask for population reports or inventory reports. Most vendors haven't provided these in any sort of regular schedule in the past, but you can request them and they should be able to help you with them. On those reports, you want to make sure you've got the following information: account numbers. Every installation of a piece of mailing equipment has at least 3 to 4 different account numbers, and it's important you know each one. What's the installation account used if you're placing an order, if you're placing service calls or buying supplies? What's your lease number? Do you have a special lease contract number? And what are your postage accounts? And usually you're going to have 2 postage accounts, one for any prepaid funds and one for advance funds. For your leases, very important to know the rate you're spending, the term of the lease, the end of lease date, and what items are covered. The end of lease date is the most important because you want to make sure you don't have an evergreen clause that's automatically renewing you into future contracts that you weren't aware of. Also, the day you sign the lease, if you have a copy of your actual lease agreement, may not be the date that lease started. If it's renewing a previous lease, it might be 3 to 6 months later that the actual lease is commencing. Know your meter rentals and maintenance agreements, and the model and serial number and description of every item that the vendor shows that you have. A best practice is what we do for our clients, and you can do it yourself, is you enter numbers onto the vendor's website, and from there you can monitor your inventory, the invoices, and the postage balances on your accounts. Then find all active locations with equipment. So the vendor may show you a list of where they think you have all your equipment, but if you're a larger organization, you may have acquisitions or companies that go under different names that they've never sort of pulled in, or locations that went rogue and didn't go in your corporate program. So it's important to find all locations with equipment so you can add them to your master inventory reports. We find that you can survey the sites to find that out. We find you get very inconsistent answers. We find that the best way to do it is to go to accounts payable and do queries on the main vendors and see where you have spends. Calculate your postage spends on a location by location basis, and then set up a schedule for continual review. By having this visibility, you're able to save large amounts of money. By doing this for our clients, we save our clients on average 60%. And it's because we're managing it this way. You can do these things yourself. It just takes some work to get it into the right format so it can be managed. People don't really make bad decisions on equipment. They just don't have the right information in front of them in order to do it. Now, we have a bonus section that I wanted to talk about today because postage rates just got announced. They're going into effect on January 21st. So we want to talk, by having visibility to the equipment, it also gives you visibility to the postage spends you have at each location. So you can manage through the vendor's websites and through different tools all the postage that all is done through all your sites. By knowing the postage, you can find ways to save money in postage by moving mail to the right classes and taking advantage of discounts that the post office offers. So what I want to do is highlight on the most common classes of mail and the most common ways that you can save money. All the rates we're looking at are the newest postage rates that are going into effect on January 21st. So first off, by using a postage meter or PC postage, you now save 3 cents per piece. So it goes from 50 cents down to 47 cents, and that's up to 3.5 ounces of mail. The 3 cent reduction happens. So if you're not using a postage meter or PC postage and you're doing any significant volume, I recommend that you switch to them. For as little as $15 or $20 a month, you can get a system that does it, and you can at least save the 3 cents. This is what that savings means for you based on your postage spends. If you send $10,000 a year in mail, basically in letter type mail, it's $652 a year in savings. If you do 100,000, it's $6,500. Basically a 6% savings, which is pretty nice. If you're doing over 500 pieces a day or 1,000 pieces or more for pickup, and sometimes slightly lower volumes will qualify based on your area, consider using a pre-sort service. So pre-sort services take your mail from 47 cents down to, depending on your volumes, 40.8 to 45.8. They pick it up for you, commingle it with their other clients, spray the barcodes on the piece, submit it to the Postal Service, and they share the discounts that they get. So the most common way is they'll have you meter it at a lower price, and then they'll split the discounts with you, or there might be a small fee for it. But it still should be less than you would pay otherwise for postage. Okay? If you're doing more volume or you have large jobs, you may want to consider doing automated mailings in-house, where you can bring mail down from 47 cents down to, if it's first class, like invoices and checks, down to 37.8 to 42.4. Or marketing mail, if it's non-differentiated, it's like newsletters and flyers and solicitations, down to 25.1 cents. And if you're a nonprofit, down to 13.6 cents. So you can see that you can move a letter from 50 cents down to 13.6 cents based on who you are, what type of equipment you use, and what steps you're willing to take in order to automate it. Okay. Next, the other thing that happened is when you use automation classes, and pre-sort is actually included in that, the first 3.5 ounces goes for the same price as the 1 ounce mail, or a 1 ounce piece. So consider this, a 3 ounce newsletter that's 92 cents if you use stamps, 89 cents if you were to use 89 cents if you were to use, if you were to run it through a meter, but that goes at the same price as a 1 ounce piece. So the savings on that is over 50%. And that's the most important thing. When you're using multiple ounces, it's really important that, if the heavier weight items, pre-sort services or automation classes make a huge amount of sense. Folding flats. If you're doing a lot of things in 9x12s, the envelopes are really expensive. The envelopes weigh more. If you can fold those in half into a 6x9 or 6x9.5 envelope, the price goes down even if you don't use automation classes. So think about someone who puts, 8 pages into a flat. It would cost $1.40 typically. By just putting it into a metered 6x9 envelope, it's 70 cents, a 50% savings. And if you can automate it, it goes down even further. So everyone will get a copy of this presentation, and it just goes to show these are the important things. When you have visibility to the mail volumes, you can push things to the right classes that can save you the most amount of money. Priority and Express. So there were a lot of changes that happened in 2015, and so it's just important for me to talk about what that was. There are 3 classes of mail for Priority and Priority Express. There's Retail, Commercial Base, and Commercial Plus. Retail is the rate that you get either at the retail counter of the post office or through postage meters. Commercial Base is what you get when you use a PC postage solution, and you could submit the address in this format. So instead of using a meter imprint or a stamp, you can generate a 4x6 label that has the address, the tracking barcode on the piece. Then there's Commercial Plus, which are for people that do over 50,000 pieces of priority mail a year, or have some sort of agreement or using a third-party consolidator. They can qualify for Commercial Plus rates. So the average savings in Commercial Base is 10% for Priority, and for Express it's 12%. So as a best-in-class process, if you do a lot of Priority or Priority Express, consider using a PC postage solution to do those pieces. 1, you get tracking, which is great. You get free tracking of your mail pieces. And 2, you get a lot more information about the piece. So there are multiple ways to do this in order to get this. So in multiple vendors. The first is you can use a PC postage tool like Pitney Bowes, Stamps.com, and Neopost all have tools that that you can use to be able to generate these types of address labels. Or there's third-party manifest systems if your volumes are high that you can use. But tools start as little as $5 to $15 a month that can do this. Some of them are included with higher-end mailing equipment. So it's just important if you're doing a lot of Priority to be able to look at these options. The downside to it is you have to type the address in. So sometimes operators don't want to have to stop what they're doing to physically type the address into a computer or into a screen on a mail machine in order to get the savings. But it's important to know, does this apply, or is there a lot of volume? Are these shipments going to regular places where you could have your own address list and make it simple? FirstClass Parcel. So there's a category, the post office has been growing faster than the private carriers, mainly because on lightweight shipments going to residences, they have the best rate. So under 5 pounds, the post office has really attractive rates because they're delivering to homes every day. They also have where UPS and FedEx rates start at £1. With the Postal Service, they have a first-class parcel rate that is by the ounce. And so what that means is packages start at basically $2.66 a package. You can get up to 4 ounces as a package out the door. So if you're sending lightweight samples, or even if you're sending documents but you want tracking, there are beefy envelopes that you could get that would qualify as a package with the Postal Service, and for as little as $2.66 you can now track an item. So what's interesting is there's 2 classes of first-class parcel. Just like priority mail, there's a retail and there's a commercial. Retail is if you just slap your meter imprint on it, and commercial is if you generate the 4x6 label like you see here. The difference is with this rate increase, with this rate change, is the difference in rates between just the retail, slapping a postage meter imprint versus the commercial rate is now huge. It's anywhere between 15% to 26% difference, which is a huge difference. But the commercial rates go up to 15.99 ounces. where the retail rates only go up to 13 ounces. So what that means is that if you're doing heavier items that would have to go priority mail, they can be rated at the ounce rate. And the savings on those 14, 15, and 15 up to 15.99 ounces are up to like 59%. So it's really important to look at these classes. And then the final saving strategy is around certifieds. A lot of people use the green card to send their certifieds, and they will just get them out the door. By having visibility to your mail spends, you can figure out, well, how many certified pieces am I doing at each site, at some of my, especially my bigger sites. If I switch to electronic return receipt, which instead of getting the green card back, you simply, will put on the electronic return receipt, and then you'll be able to track it online where you can see all of your return receipt items, whether they've been delivered or not delivered. And then when needed, you can print out a proof of signature on an 8.5 by 11 sheet right off your computer. It works for some organizations, not for others. The $1.25 savings is nice. Being able to control all your data on one web dashboard versus worrying what green cards physically came back is easier. But it usually means someone has to control it internally. And that works in some companies and doesn't in others. So the point of showing you these 4 things was to show you that by having visibility to your mail spends, you can find things that will save you money in postage. So if you need help from the experts, this is what we do every day for our clients. We have helped our clients save $34 million on equipment and fees and overcharges and lost postage, which is amounted to an average of about $900,000 per client. But what we're the most proud of is that our average client savings, is 60%. And we haven't had a client be below 25 or 30%. And we've had them as high as in the high 80s. Everyone on our team came from the mailing industry. We have 240 years of experience in the mailing industry, working for the equipment side. We provide a web tool, so a web dashboard that gives you visibility to all of your mailing equipment expenses and postage spends across your entire organization. It's like nothing, the vendors offer nothing that's even close to this, because the vendors basically give you a listing of your invoices. We consolidate it to be able to show you what's going on at every location with pictures and descriptions, as well as every postage refill and activity that's been done at each site. By having this visibility, we've also recovered over $8 million in lost postage, vendor overcharges, and fees. So if you need help from the experts, this is what we do every day. How it works with any client is we're willing to do a no-cost analysis of all your mail spends. Basically, we'll pull all of your mail spends together so you can see what you're spending across your organization. And there's no charge and there's no obligation for that. Once we conduct the analysis, we'll show you like where there are overcharges, what would be, what is a potential plan that could fix that, and give you something that you could make a decision on. If you decide to move forward, we'll go submit the vendor credits, the lost postage for you, we'll fix the fees, we'll help you negotiate a pricing catalog with, and a negotiated service agreement with a core vendor. And then we'll work with each location to assess what they need for equipment. Do they need for right sizes? Do we need to terminate? Do we need to look at PC postage? And we'll pull full implementation of that savings. We'll present opportunities, we'll present these opportunities for your approval. We don't do anything without your approval. We'll manage it in a web dashboard so you can see everything that's happening throughout your organization. And then we'll provide ongoing support, because most organizations we work with have leases that expire in years to come, and it needs to be managed sort of over time, on a continual basis versus just a one-time activity. Most of our clients are on gain share, so if we don't save you any money, we're free. We haven't ever found that. Most of our clients are saving large amounts of money. But if you have any interest, we're happy to talk to you about it. Our clients are some of the largest organizations throughout the US and Canada, including 8 of the top 25 banks, 3 of the top 10 insurance companies, 1 of the top 2 pharmacy chains. So it doesn't necessarily matter what type of organization. It just matters that you have a fleet of meters or equipment that you might need help with. So we're always trying to educate people. So none of this, everything we went over today, we tried to educate you on things that you could do on your own. If you need help from the experts, we're there for you. We also try to provide continual education to the community. The biggest, most popular one that we run each year is the rate change webinars. And so we're having one, actually we just included a new date where we're having them on December 12th, January 16th, and January 17th. We're gonna have rate change webinars. And you can register online for them at postaladvocate.com. We found that it's really important for people to be able to budget for the rate increases, to know which classes are changing, and to find the saving strategies similar to the ones we went over today. So as a summary, buy the right level of equipment with only the needed features. And make sure you're buying from the right vendors at the lowest prices. There's a lot of leeway in what people pay for mailing equipment, and it's important to do the right steps to make sure you're paying the right amounts. Look at every bill and watch out for fees and overcharges. They're out there. We rarely find a client that doesn't have them. And we usually find clients that have tens of thousands of dollars of them. Pay attention to postage funding, recovery, and rewards programs. So make sure that you understand where all your postage is and how it's being managed and what are the best ways to deal with it. And then figure out a way to maintain some sort of detailed visibility and oversight to all aspects of your account. So as long as you have a continual level of being able to view what you're spending at every site, there's a review process for bills, there's a review process for leases, you have inventory reports, you understand the postage spends at each site, and from having that data, you can make good decisions. Whether it's good decisions about the equipment, whether it's good decisions about fees, whether it's good decision about figuring out ways to save money in postage. So I hope this session was helpful. Hope it gave you at least a few ideas that you can take back to your organization. And we want to open it up to any questions. Well, thank you, everybody. We'll stay on for a couple more minutes in case anybody has any questions. But I want to thank everybody for attending, and we'll have more webinars with educational content, and we hope that you find some of them helpful. Have a great afternoon, everybody.